Did you know that older adults are increasingly targeted by cyber criminals, with nearly 1 in 4 Americans aged 65 or older falling victim to identity theft? Imagine your personal information being a target in the vast cyber universe where savvy thieves are lurking. Today, we explore essential strategies to safeguard your online identity in the digital age. Welcome to Aging Together, a podcast dedicated to exploring the challenges and opportunities of caring for our aging loved ones. This podcast is a product of Caregiver Consulting and Healthy Solutions, a private consulting practice dedicated to helping you navigate the aging process with ease. Together, we will dive into a wide range of topics, including health and wellness, financial planning, caregiving, and more. This podcast is for everyone, whether you are an older adult looking to age in place, a caregiver seeking support and guidance, a young or middle-aged adult planning for the future, or simply someone interested in learning more about the aging process. I hope you'll join me on this journey. Let's navigate aging together. What's up, everyone? I'm your host, Pooja, and you're listening to Aging Together. December is National Identity Theft Prevention and Awareness Month. As more older adults integrate their lives into the modern online world, they've become easier targets for online dangers. Some of the most common scams we hear are the ones that target older adults by way of Medicare or the IRS. Without knowing how to tell the real apart from the fake, it becomes extremely easy for older adults to fall for these scams. For today's episode, I have the honor of interviewing Sagar Pandya, an expert and leader in cybersecurity. For disclosure purposes, he is also my husband. As a Chicago native, Sagar is the co-founder and a partner at a couple of IT and cybersecurity firms. As an IT and cyber engineer turned entrepreneur who has been in the industry since 2005, he has led designing and implementing small and large IT infrastructures, led many cyber breach calls, executed ransomware negotiations, restored organizations after cyber incidents, built numerous security programs, and creates frequent content on the world of cybersecurity, and has given countless talks, webinars, trainings on cyber and AI. As if that's not all enough, he is even a licensed cyber insurance broker. His passion for security started at a young age, and his mission is to continue protecting the world's data. Together, we're taking a dive into cybersecurity and how to protect yourself and your families from identity theft online. Please join me in welcoming Sagar Pandya to the show. Hi, Sagar. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Pooja, glad to be here to talk about this very important topic. Thank you for having me.
I gave a brief intro bio about you already, as well as some startling data points on identity theft and how scammers target older adults frequently. But before we get into all that, I want to hear more about your background in this industry and your passion for keeping people safe online.
Absolutely. Cybersecurity is such an interesting industry. It impacts everyone equally, regardless of who you are. It does not discriminate, and it's a mission-driven effort for everyone that works in this field. I do it because I want to use my skills to help protect the world's data, to prevent bad actors or criminals from taking away from innocent folks is why I am so passionate about what I do.
What is identity theft? Can you define it briefly? Maybe provide some examples of different types of that?
Identity theft is essentially when someone you don't know uses your personal or financial information without your permission. It can damage your reputation, credit status, and even cost you a lot of time and a lot of headaches. Some of those examples include stolen funds, credit card fraud or bank account fraud, credit file fraud, health information theft, employment theft, biometric social engineering, phishing, the list goes on and on. These continue to become more and more sophisticated, especially in 2023 and beyond, and it's getting so much harder to tell what is real and what is fake.
Is this like all the phishing emails that our companies send us for fun?
Absolutely. And organizations utilize these types of trainings because these are what help condition and build that cybersecurity muscle that all of us need to fully focus on so that we don't fall victim to these scams.
What are some of the most prevalent online scams or methods used by cybercriminals to steal personal information and identity, especially those that target older adults?
I've been in this industry for a long time, and I've seen the threats evolve over the years. And it's so much easier now to become a cyber criminal than it was, 10 or even 5 years ago. And it's because of all the technology that we have access today. Organizations are creating software, they're creating AI tools, they're creating automation, they're creating ways to be more persuasive, and it allows anyone from any part of the country to become a threat actor or a cyber criminal. Some of those most common scams are done via phone and email. If you think about it, you don't really have control over who is going to call your phone number or who is going to send you an email. Sure, you can use things like spam protection and caller ID block, but you're typically on the receiving end of those types of communication methods. And older adults are perfect targets because they're usually very trusting. They usually have very good credit scores, and they're usually very established in their savings or their financial hygiene. So some of these types of scams, like we talked about just a moment ago, include phishing scams. They include tech support or romance scams. They include scams for lottery or healthcare. The grandparent scam, where a quote-unquote grandchild calls and says that they're stuck in another country and they need funds to be able to get back home. There's scams around charity or social security, and these are done mainly via phone calls. We talk about our elder adults and our seniors these days. A vast majority of them are more conditioned to answer phone calls than they are emails. So these bad actors often call in pretending to be someone they're not, and their job is essentially just to spend their time convincing these unsuspecting older adults into either transferring them money, giving up sensitive information like social security numbers or bank account info, or I've even seen folks that allow these fraudsters to remote into their computers and extort them for any type of financial or personal information. And older adults are typically, again, more trusting than other age groups, and they're more likely to give up the personal information. They're also not as savvy with technology, and that causes some challenges in their ability to spot these fraudsters.
Those are a lot of good examples. I actually hadn't heard about fake grandchildren pretending to call grandparents. That's awfully scary. How can individuals, particularly older adults, recognize potential red flags or warning signs of a scam or fraudulent activity, either over the phone or online?
This is becoming very, very challenging as the days go on, simply because of the evolution of technology that most people have access to. The best red flags usually are a false sense of urgency, threats or intimidation, requests for personal info, spelling or grammar mistakes, unknown phone numbers, payments via unknown methods, or any other unusual requests. These bad actors, they become very convincing, and they essentially force you to move quickly so that you don't spend too much time thinking about what's actually happening. And they can sound very convincing, right? Especially with an authoritative type of voice, them wanting to move extremely quickly through the process, and them threatening you with intimidation, such as getting arrested or getting a fine for not paying a certain tax bill or something like that. These threat actors, they play a volume game. They know that a certain percentage of people are going to fall victim, and they bank on that statistic. So the incentive for the criminals is to move quickly. They can't spend hours on calls. And I know you've seen these probably on YouTube where the scammers get scammed. But it doesn't make sense for these cyber criminals to spend 4 hours on a call when there may not be a probability of them succeeding. So because of this, these cyber criminals, they enforce these sense of urgencies and these intimidations because they need to move very quickly. And because of the speed in which they move, they often make mistakes. And a self-aware and educated individual would be able to identify this, right? Especially if you have a grammatical error, a spelling error, or some type of misstep in the communication. Somebody that's aware of what's happening can pick up on this pretty quickly. But unfortunately, most of the older adults, at least from what I've seen, they don't have this level of conditioning, right? And they just want to move quickly because of the fear of not complying with the request.
Fear is a big tactic, and it definitely comes from the lack of awareness. What measures should older adults and their families take to protect themselves against, these types of scams and phishing and theft and everything you explained, both in terms of preventative actions and then immediate responses if they suspect that they've been targeted?
This is a topic that I'm very, very passionate about, and it's the reason why I wake up every single day wanting to continue to protect the world's data, because I feel that a vast majority of these cyber actions can be fully preventable. And I also am very passionate about sharing this knowledge and ensuring that people have the right information to become better advocates of good security. First off, I believe there needs to be more conversation about security threats in all families. It sounds strange, but that to me is the most effective strategy. Talking about it and giving everyone a safe space to know that they can ask questions so that they can learn to become more self-aware of what's happening. No one's going to be safe if the convo is not had on a regular basis. And I believe this keeps everyone alert and aware about what's happening, especially for the elder adults. They typically don't get phishing simulation training via email. They're not working, technologically savvy jobs in corporate America or anywhere else in the world that requires them to practice better cybersecurity. They only rely on their own individual experience and the conversations from those that are around them. So in these conversations, we got to start talking about staying educated. We got to continue using unique passwords everywhere. With the release of AI tools, which is just crazy right now, you could clone anyone's voice, right, through a YouTube video or their voicemail message or something, and be able to create and reconstruct their voice that sounds very convincing. So nowadays, we advise customers use a family safe word or a code word that isn't stored anywhere, right? It's not the answer to a security question like, what was the name of the street you grew up on, or what's your favorite pet's name, right? So using a family word or a code word that you would ask this AI voice that may or may not call in. That's going to have to be a strategy moving forward. Considering locking credit files and making sure that your loved ones always know that if there's a suspicious transaction or a call that comes in on your phone, to hang up and call that merchant, that bank, that financial organization from a known phone number on their website or on the back of a credit card or somewhere else that's known and trusted. And of course, things like two-factor authentication, updating and backing up your devices, and consistently checking in. We can't just focus on identity theft individually and expect us to become successful in keeping our identities safe. Security is a team sport. Everyone has to participate. Everyone has to continually practice it. And that's what's going to allow us to keep these threat actors outside of our personal information. I've even told people, create a document, for your elderly family members with all of your names and phone numbers and put it on the refrigerator under a magnet for easy access. Save your contact details in your phones. If your grandparents or your older family members are not tech savvy and they're using smartphones like iPhones or Android devices, I'm talking to all of you middle-aged folks or you children of these families. Take the extra step during the holidays or the next time you visit your elderly family members. Set their phones up. You all know how to operate these devices, and the more you can implement that sooner, the better you're going to be able to protect the loved ones that you care so much about. Keeping each other informed about travel plans is also another cool thing that I think you can do, so that that grandparent scam that I talked about earlier, your grandparents will know if you're traveling out to Mexico or somewhere overseas. And if a call comes in, and there may be a reality where you may have to call at some point, although it's pretty unlikely, this gives them comfort knowing where you actually are, right? Outside of just the loving and careness of a family in general. And then find and work with vendors who are sensitive to supporting older adults and seniors. There are organizations out there that have extra programs, and they take more sensitive measures to work with elderly folks that may not be as tech savvy, who give them that comfort and that reassurance that they're going to be taken care of. Again, this is a team sport. We all have to participate. We all have to continue working at it on a regular basis. And if we do that, we can greatly reduce the probability that one of us is going to become a victim to a cyber threat.
I like how you said it would be cool to tell grandparents your travel plans.
Absolutely. Who wouldn't want their grandparents to know where their grandchildren are traveling to, right? And not have to find out via some social media profile.
If they're on social media.
You would be surprised. I've actually run into some seniors and elderly adults that are quite tech savvy, and they maintain pretty informative social media profiles. So it's not a generalization that all elder adults are not tech savvy. I've seen my fair share of the ones that are, and it's really interesting to see how they interact with tech.
No, of course. I meant a lot of grandkids don't talk to their grandparents a lot about their lives, and a lot of them aren't on social media. So sometimes they don't even know everything that their grandkids are doing. So this would be a good way for them to not only involve their grandparents, but also maybe tell them exciting stories. And then when they come back, their grandparents could ask them about their trips and stuff.
Throughout life experiences, I get reminded of mortality all the time, right? Not to deviate too much away from our podcast topic, but there's always a win-win, right? Whether it's telling family members of your plans because it's a cybersecurity strategy, or just telling them because of the goodness of your heart and wanting to become better family members, I think is a win-win for everyone. So if you could sprinkle in some cyber conversation around it, that's even going to be better and the icing on the cake.
I know you already shared the example of fake grandkids calling their grandparents from overseas and whatnot, but can you share some other examples of recent identity theft cases or online scams that specifically affect older adults and highlight the tactics that they used and the potential consequences for the victims?
Absolutely. It's a very sensitive topic, and it just makes me so disappointed in the view of the world that our vulnerable elder adults and seniors are continually taken advantage of. We've seen so many of these. And when I talk about the grandparent scam, here's really what happens. The elders, the seniors, the elder adults, they get a phone call from a grandchild or someone in a local authority or local hospital calling to say, your grandchild, and they name the person because they can find this information online. Hey, your grandchild Sagar has been in an accident and they need some money to get their passport to make it back home. Here are some wire instructions. We need to move urgently. And if you're a senior or an elder adult, and you don't have this self-awareness around security training, you don't know where your grandkids are, you're going to become extremely worried and concerned, right? And you're going to be a trusting individual to say, of course, I will do whatever it takes to get my injured grandchild back home. So that creates a challenge, right? How do you identify what's real and what's not? We're also seeing a lot of fake tech support scams, people pretending to be Microsoft or Apple or Dell Computer, calling in and saying your IP address has been listed as a vulnerable device and there are hackers trying to get into your computer as we speak. You need to let us into your machine so we can do a scan and verify that the threat has been removed. This is the most common thing. And you have to think about it. Microsoft does not have the contact information of individual people. I can assure you that, being in the industry almost 20 years. But unfortunately, a lot of elder folks do not know that this is the case. So the Microsoft scams continue to take advantage of people's desire to stay safe online. You also hear things like fake law enforcement talking about arrest warrants, where you got the sheriff's office or your local police department that call in saying that there is an arrest warrant for this individual and that if they don't comply, they're going to be in a world of trouble. You have to remember, Pooja, we talked about this earlier, where these threat actors, they put in a false sense of urgency and they sound very persuading. They have an authoritative voice. They are very demanding. They sometimes even have condescending tones, right? To create the illusion that this is something serious that the listener needs to focus on. We also hear about things like IRS agents, especially around April during tax time,
Right.
where IRS agents call our vulnerable seniors and elder adults, and they pretend that there are back taxes and that the IRS is going to come to your house.
They actually did that to my grandpa one year, and exactly what you said. He got so scared and he called my mom and then immediately started driving to the bank to go withdraw money. And my mom, thankfully, she called my dad, and then they were both like, so my dad then went in a car behind to like catch him at the bank so that he wouldn't do this. And they caught him in time finally. But it's exactly this. Like, IRS agents are the easiest way to target older adults because naturally we are trained to fear IRS agents.
And it's unfortunate that the conditioning of this fear leads to compliance of the actions. And the biggest challenge we have with these scam phone calls that come in is a lot of us use cell phones now, right? You could probably count on one hand how many people in your personal life actually have what's called a landline. And for our younger listeners, you probably don't even know what a landline is, but it's the house phone that we used to have that it would have something called caller ID that would show you where the phone number is actually calling from. Nowadays, most people, you don't have the IRS's phone number probably saved as a contact on your phone. So if someone calls in, regardless of what number is displayed on your device, and they have an authoritative voice and they create a false sense of urgency and they are extorting or threatening you with some type of arrest or intimidation, you're going to want to comply to it if you're not aware of what's going on. So that creates the challenge here. And I'm sorry to hear that your grandfather had that experience, but glad to hear that it was stopped before it led to anything else. And the list continues to go on. The bad actors continue to get more and more creative. And Pooja, I think honestly the biggest challenge I'm starting to see now is the vulnerable non-native English speaker population who often get tricked into giving up personal information because they don't understand the language fully, and they end up sending out funds because of their lack of understanding about the systems and processes in the US. So when I talked earlier about just having these conversations with your family members, especially the ones that don't speak English very well, creating this regular dialogue around what's happening is going to help them think twice and save you an entire world of headache.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about social media and how there's some older adults that are savvy and are on social media and then some who aren't. For those who are, what role do social media platforms and online communication channels play into the context of scams and theft and the targeting of older adults? And how can individuals better safeguard their information while they're using these platforms?
Let's talk really quick on the anatomy of an identity theft case before I talk about what it involves from a social media platform standpoint. Typically what happens is there's a scammer that calls in and extracts personal information from a senior or elderly family member, such as a social security number, bank account number, their name, address, date of birth, so on and so on. And typically these threat actors end up either extracting funds by getting money wired to them, getting gift cards sent to them electronically, getting money somehow transferred through a money transfer service, or they end up collecting personal information to then be able to create mortgages, buy cars, open up credit cards, and create more chaos with that stolen identity. Where does social media fit into that? Well, we as people, we like to share information on social media very publicly and very easily. And this is actually a huge trove of data for bad actors. You're easily able to look up names of family members, birthdays, other personal information related to each family member, and you can directly verify this by messaging each other on the social media apps themselves. There's nothing stopping these threat actors from creating fake social media accounts of grandkids or family members using their photos and messaging our vulnerable adults into tricking them to sending funds or giving up personal information. So social media platforms are very dangerous if not used correctly. And I'm not talking just about the older adults and senior citizens here. We as a society share a lot of information on social media that is so easily extractable for these threat actors that they can use it to go against us and cause damage in our identities. So social media plays a very important role for the threat actors because it is literally a treasure trove of information. And there is really not a good way to know whether somebody on a social media platform that's messaging you is truly who they say they are.
I think a big point that you've mentioned here is people messaging these older adults by acting like they're somebody they know. And I think something that I'm taking away from this is if I ever have somebody messaging me pretending to be you or pretending to be one of my parents or a friend, the first thing I'm doing is calling them, right? Like the first thing I want to do is call them and be like, hey, is this you?
Absolutely.
And I think that's the easiest way to figure out if that's really the right person.
Absolutely. And we think about that analogy for when you get phone calls from financial institutions, right? Like American Express or JP Morgan Bank. They're calling stating that there's somebody in a position of authority at that organization. But in reality, you would hang up and call a known phone number, right? Like the number on the back of a credit card or a debit card, number on the bank website. So absolutely, you're right. When you get these types of messages, inherently you, as a younger person in this generation of tech, would think to hang up or block the message and call a friend. The elders that we love and support, they may not think about this intuitively, and they may get sucked into giving away that information very easily.
Right. And so that's why I think that's an important message to share with the older relatives in your family is if they ever get a message or a phone call from somebody stating that they're you, that they immediately call you first to verify that it is actually you.
And it's so important on that point earlier, Pooja, about the need for the younger folks in the families to add their contact names and their phone numbers into the phones of the ones that we love and care about, right, in our families that are older, because then we can help condition them to say, hey, grandma, hey, grandpa, if you ever get a call and someone pretends to be me, no matter what they say, you can hang up and dial me on either my direct cell phone number or one of the other family members. And that's going to greatly reduce the risk of them falling victim to a cyber scam.
Yeah, exactly. Are there specific cybersecurity tools or software that older adults and their families can easily use to improve or enhance their online security and reduce this risk of falling victim?
So we've deployed hundreds of different tools and software across organizations of all sizes, right? From single sole proprietor shops all the way to organizations that have tens of thousands of employees. The challenge with tools and software is they can be very useful, but they're only a part of the strategy. Quite honestly, the first line of defense is going to be the human, right? The human is the one that answers the call. The human is the one that opens the email, right? The human is the one that executes on the action to get threat actors remoted onto their machines. So yes, there are tools and software that can be useful, but they're only part of the strategy. I highly recommend when we have these conversations about security in our next family gathering, that these should be used in addition to having those tough talks about cyber threats within the family, especially with the older adults. You could probably do things like, password managers, right, to ensure that your passwords are different. And I'm a huge advocate of that, as you've heard me say before. There's antivirus software, sure, that can prevent viruses from spreading, but the threats are evolving so much that some of those softwares don't become as efficient as they once were. So really, I'd say, password managers, giving elder adults and seniors in your families educational resources, even doing regular updates and backups on their devices, and just ensuring that you have constant conversations, right, with the ones that you care about. That's really is what's going to help. Tools and software will be a small piece of that, but they are not part of the larger strategy in conditioning ourselves to become more cyber aware.
That makes a lot of sense. In your experience, how has the landscape of these cyber threats and identity theft evolved over the recent years? I know you mentioned, it's much easier to do it now than it was even maybe 5 years ago.
Right. Yep.
And are there any emerging trends that you're noticing that individuals and particularly older adults should be aware of?
Yeah, totally. And depending on who you ask, either it's a scary time or it's a very interesting time that we live in today. So as of this recording, December of 2023, ChatGPT and AI tools have been out in the wild for about a year. And I know all you listeners out there have probably heard of this at some point in the last 12 months, right? AI tools are going to take over and they're going to take all of our jobs and we're not going to be able to do anything. We're going to have so much free time on our hands. I don't think that's true. I think AI tools are going to help enhance the way that we do things. But the scary side of this is now AI tools are accessible by folks that want to do good, right? I'd like to consider myself one of the good guys, but AI tools are also accessible to those that want to do harm as well. And Pooja, to your point on what are some of the emerging trends, I think by and large, the release of AI tools are now going to make it even easier to fool people, especially the AI voice cloning tools. This allows anyone to clone a voice, which I've even seen examples of these tools surpassing bank voice verification systems for some of the largest banks in the world, which I won't name here right now, but it has been done and proven that these bank voice systems are failing verifications from cloned voices. So my point earlier on using a family safe word or a code word that's not an answer to a security question like the name of the street you grew up on or a name of a pet or something that can be easily searched or guessed online. I truly believe 2024 is going to be a year of AI voice fraud, and it's going to continue to cause headaches for the family members that don't know how to prevent this from happening. And this all stems back to having these conversations on a regular basis. It is going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to tell soon the difference between a legitimate phone call from one person and an AI cloned version of their voice. And that's the thing that scares me the most.
You brought up a really good point, and I want to really emphasize this because you brought it up a couple times earlier too. Your family safe word should not be something that's searchable online, and it should not be the answer to any of your security questions on any of your important accounts, bank, legal, finance, anything. One of the bigger reasons for that is, like Sagar mentioned earlier, we as humans love to share things publicly. And a lot of the answers that we put to these security questions are things that we willingly share on social media.
That's right. Absolutely.
So when there's questions like your first car, well, I'm pretty sure I can scroll back on Facebook 5-10 years ago and figure out what your first car was.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? If it's your, what high school did you go to? That's very easily accessible and searchable.
Name of the street you grew up on, very easily searchable on public records online.
So a lot of these security questions are searchable. And so you want to make sure that between what you're sharing online and between what your answers to your security questions are, that whatever family safe word you create is completely random and specific to just your family.
And it could be just a word like Antarctica, because I'm looking at a poster right now in this podcast studio of a map. It could be the word Antarctica. It could be the word shark. It could be any word that you continually talk about and agree on as a family to use in these instances. And to deviate just for a second, because I'm so passionate about this topic, when everyone's using security questions, right, on online platforms, you can lie on the answers, right? So you may sign up for some online service and they may be giving you 10 questions to choose from. And for example, if you choose what was the name of the street you grew up on, you can lie. No one's going to validate whether you're telling the truth. It's only there for your purposes to be able to recover your account in the event you lose access to it by, forgetting a password or having to change an email. So if someone asks you on a website the name of the street you grew up on, you can say something like Batman or, cheese pizza or any other word. So I think in addition to using a very unique word as a safe word or family code word, you can also use fake answers and lie on security questions. That way, if someone is truly after your data, they don't have a way to search through your social platforms to be able to get access to data that they shouldn't have access to in the first place.
That is not without its own issues too, though, right? Because you have to remember that you lied on those answers and remember the answers that you provided.
Absolutely. And that's where password managers come in, right? Use password managers that have good two-factor authentication. There's so many out there. Do a Google search, do some research to see what's the best one for you. But that's where these password managers are going to be key. And there's even password managers that have family sharing options where you can create a family vault where you may be able to monitor and maintain passwords for your elder adults and not necessarily share your own passwords with them. But if you really want to be a great grandkid and you want to be the tech savvy leader in the family unit, getting these password managers, doing the family vault, having lied answers on the security questions and unique family codes that you don't share in the password manager, that's going to be a great strategy to help the family stay connected and safe together.
I think that's the perfect holiday gift that families can give their older relatives this season. What do you think?
Absolutely. Give the gift of cyber to your family members this holiday season.
Time and cyber. What is one takeaway you'd like the audience to consider as it relates to staying safe online?
Honestly, Pooja, if there's one thing from this entire episode, it's having regular conversations on how to stay safe together as a family, or even a group of friends, coworkers, etc. I think all age groups have to be part of this discussion. And I truly believe if we can create a safe space for everyone to ask questions, if we can share knowledge with each other, if we can remove judgment and bias, right, and intimidation and fear and anxiety from these conversations, and if we address it, I think the more we open up about it, the more awareness we're going to create for each other. And again, cybersecurity is a team sport. Everyone has to share their responsibility to win together. And if we can practice, just like our favorite sports teams do, on a regular basis together, that is the only way we're going to be able to improve not only our self-awareness, but our ability to keep personal data away from these threat actors and fraudsters. And it's not just identity theft, it's cyber safety in general. The tech is only going to get more sophisticated and bigger 2024 and beyond, and it's going to get so much harder to stay ahead of these threat actors. They spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, figuring out how to trick and persuade you into stealing your personal data. So it is only necessary for us to practice this on a regular basis. So have these conversations with your loved ones. Talk about a quick 5-minute game plan on what to do if something happens. Create safe and warm spaces where people can have conversations and ask questions, and always be aware about the team sport mentality. Let's help each other. Let's support each other. Let's continue to stay ahead of cyber threats. And as always, stay safe out there.
And create that family safe word. Sagar, thank you so much for joining me today. This was such an important conversation around online safety, especially for those vulnerable in our families, such as children and older relatives.
Happy to join, Pooja. Thanks for having me on this episode. I hope all the information was valuable. Let's continue to practice safe cyber online.
To all my listeners, thank you for tuning into this week's episode on identity theft prevention and awareness. Sharing expert perspectives on various age-related topics and services can help the community learn how to plan for a healthier future. At Caregiver Consulting and Healthy Solutions, we are dedicated to helping you navigate aging together. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.